Saturday. Christmas comes early.
Unbelievable! Welcome to this incredible scene.
Bills.
To the end zone!
Chargers.
It's a touchdown!
An exclusive NFL game.
That's fantastic!
Live in primetime.
Wow!
Only on Peacock.
With a Christmas gift to their fans.
They're having some fun now.
Bills versus Chargers. Saturday, 7:30 Eastern. Exclusively on Peacock.
Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the credit card created by Apple. It gives you unlimited daily cash back that you can now choose to grow in a high-yield savings account that's built right into the Wallet app. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of Vacations. Icon of the Seas, arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We know that Wednesday's announcement that the club parted ways with head coach Matt Potter came as a surprise to many, especially given the timing. And we also understand that you all want to know the why. So let me begin by saying, we know you all understand that with any employment decision within any organization, there are certain things we cannot respectfully share. That said, our goal today is twofold: being as transparent about what we can share and being clear about what the situation was not. As you're all aware, we started the season 0-3. As a club, we were frustrated with the losses in the start to the season. Unfortunately, that was then met with a lack of collaboration and partnership that we would otherwise expect from our head coach with management and ownership. There was a breakdown in the leadership, communication, and ultimately trust with the staff, which led us to this difficult decision. The culture that we stand for and that we continuously strive to uphold is deeply grounded in collaboration, strong communication, leadership, and trust. Given that these were not in force at a critical time in the season, we felt it was appropriate to take the decisive action. While the players were not directly involved in this decision, every decision we make as an organization, we believe is in their best interest. As I mentioned, we want to be clear that this decision is not related to any player issues, is not related to the Micaiah Minnis situation. Both the league and the PA are aware of the reasons for our decision, and there's nothing here for the league to investigate. We made a staffing decision that was wholly supported both by the best practices we passionately believe in and our unwavering efforts to support our players and the KC Current organization. Finally, this was not an easy thing to do for me personally or the organization, but we are committed to doing the right thing for our players, the staff, our ownership, and the Kansas City community we are so proud to represent. This has been an emotional week, and I want to commend Caroline and the team for their mental fortitude, stepping up and adapting after the news of the day. We are proud of this team, and we believe in the group as we move forward. Once again, I thank you for your time. I hope that clarifies questions you may have, and I'm open to answering others.
All right, this is Thad Bell from the Kansas City Soccer Journal. I have Daniel Sperry with me from the Kansas City Star. We just heard from Camille Ashton from KC Current, the general manager. What do you think, Daniel?
Oh, does that tell you right there? I am glad that we finally got to talk to somebody about it. I wish that maybe there was a little bit more clarity. We'll kind of dive into some of the specific things that were said, but ultimately, I think this is not going to be investigated by the NWSL or the NWSL Players Association, according to Camille Ashton. That has not been confirmed by either of those bodies yet. So there's no pending investigation into Potter, from what it sounds like, according to that situation. So this isn't like a
player abuse situation.
Yeah, and this is not. I was going to say this isn't an HR situation. Well, it's an HR situation anytime somebody gets fired. However, this is not like a league HR policy violation in which that there would need to be investigations and stuff like that, because if there was an investigation, he would have just been placed to the side of the team, most likely, instead of fired, unless they actually had information to corroborate an allegation, and there was no allegation, and there was so there was nothing to corroborate in that way. So in general, I feel like I left with more questions than I had true answers about what went on.
Yes.
Is that how you feel?
Yeah, definitely. So let's just a positive. We're assuming that everything we were told is the truth, even though it wasn't a whole lot of there, but that there was nothing that, like you said, that there was no player abuse, nothing that would lead to some kind of investigation like that. It seems much more a dispute between the coach and staff and the general manager and whoever else, but the players do not seem to be involved. They seemed genuinely surprised when we talked to them the other day after the game.
Yep. They were surprised. Both Lowe and CC nodded very much in agreement that there was they have no problem with Matt Potter. From the way, even talking to multiple players on the team over the last year. I mean, this guy was a Coach of the Year finalist, and talking to I talked to Desi, I talked to Kristen Edmonds, I talked to Lowe, I talked to a lot of people about Matt, and everybody gave glowing review. All the players gave glowing reviews about who Matt was, his character, and how he coached them. Kristen Hamilton has talked a lot about the overall culture shift that she experienced last year and how much that helped her. There are certainly some people who did not get along with Potter. As noted, Ella Masser has made her story somewhat told on a podcast about her situation and why she left the club. That's that's maybe one detractor there, and maybe shows a continued issue going on behind the scenes with staff and upper level management, but not so much with players. But ultimately, it sounds like for the people who made the decision, whatever happened was unreconcilable to them. Yeah,
and in the statement from Camille, I always want to call her Cammy, but I think it's best to call her Camille this time. She did talk about how they were 0-3, results weren't there. We weren't really expecting great results, considering that half the team has been on the disabled list in questionable or out, and many of their best players until just this last game. Or last two games, they started to come back, a couple of them.
Yeah.
I just really can't reconcile that there was a results issue when...
Ultimately, it sounded, from what I gather, and we'll play the statement here shortly, because Camille opened up with a long statement and then took questions. And ultimately, it sounds like results played a role in the conversations that they wanted to have happen, but ultimately the conversations themselves were either the issue or the lack of conversations that they wanted were the issue. And I have a hard time giving all the context of everything and what Potter was able to do with a significantly lesser product on paper
Right.
last year. And no disrespect to those players who are no longer with the team, but this roster is vastly improved depth-wise. And some of the strongest pieces of last season's team are now depth question marks of whether or not they'll play all the time. And so
with a lot of them still out or not ready to fully come back.
yeah, and so I understand frustration with results. I understand even like personally, I did not agree with Potter's ideas and tactics the first couple of games. The game in Chicago was an improvement and a return to what we kind of expected. And as Caroline Herblum said in the press conference, that they didn't really change much outside of Haley being injured or sick in the first game, or sick for the Houston game. So they didn't really change much outside of what was the initial
they went with the game plan.
And so that speaks to maybe that team was going to win regardless of who was coaching on the sidelines that night. And I think for me, that's where I have my questions about it. And it seems like they were not feeling great about the results early on, which is understandable when you get shellacked 4-2 on the road by Chicago, who's not great. You look inept against North Carolina, who's not good. And you get absolutely blasted at home, but had a really, really good 30-minute stretch against the defending champs. And so given all that context, it seems hard to really hone in on the injuries being a true problem or not the injuries, the results being a true problem in all of this. But apparently it sounds like that was part of what led to the results, or led to the conversations that eventually led to this.
Yeah, and of course we're not going to know the answer to what those conversations were or were not, or because any attempt to get more detail essentially was rebuffed and just the same wording was rephrased. I can play the clip of just you and me asking the next couple of questions, and then there's a lot of other questions asked. I think we can play that here, but that Bell Kansas City Soccer Journal. You said that the coordination between the coach and the rest of the staff was not there. Was this not something that could have been improved over time, or had it been tried to and it had failed?
Yeah, so, I mean, like I said, like I already alluded to, more than that, we have to protect the integrity of the staff and of the process, and that's all I can say at this time.
Daniel Sperry, Kansas City Star, was the idea, ultimately the question is, did this really feel like a decision that had to be made in that moment? And was the fact that the players were just hours away from a kickoff from a very important match taken into account in making that decision for ultimately that wasn't based on player complaints?
Yeah, for us, we act with immediacy in any circumstance and with any situation that comes to light. And we felt that this was having a significant impact on our culture and on our players and on our staff. And the timing is never good. The season is underway and every day is important. And so for us, it was about making sure that we handled the situation as quickly as we could.
This episode is brought to you by Google Pixel, the official fan phone of the NBA and WNBA. The new Pixel 8 and Pixel 8 Pro are built different. How? Take the Audio Magic Eraser tool that helps block out distracting crowd noise so your play-by-play commentary sounds crystal clear. The only phone engineered by Google brings out the audio you care about so your videos sound as crisp as they look. Learn more at googlestore.com/pixelnba. Audio Magic Eraser requires Google Photos app. May not work on all audio elements.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
The holidays are a time to feel and create joy. And what could be more joyous than the look on her face as she unwraps a stunning new jewelry piece from Blue Nile? How about getting 50% off your purchase? Blue Nile offers premium quality, priced below traditional retail. Their online experts are available 24/7 to answer any questions and make sure you've picked the perfect gift. For a limited time, you can get 50% off at BlueNile.com. That's 50% off at BlueNile.com.
All right, that was the audio from my first question and Daniel's first question. There was many more to come after that, but I wanted to know why this wasn't something that could be worked out through coaching the coach or a plan to have better communications, or had it been tried. And essentially we found out that it was time she had to do it. And Daniel, you asked?
Yeah, so I asked, about the immediacy of the decision. Like, did they, given the fact that this was not like an HR, a legal, you need to...
A player safety moment.
Player safety, is there criminal charges going to be brought, kind of a thing where you have to fire them in the immediate moment? The fact that it wasn't that case, and I tried to ask, like, did you feel like this was, like, is this offense, what happened, is this worth an immediate firing? And she said, what she said there. And
the immediacy.
The immediacy of in any circumstance, with any situation that comes to light. Yeah, I'll go back to this point. She said she felt that this was having a significant impact on our culture and our players and our staff. And so I get Peter. I wrote an article back. We're going to talk about culture first, because I wrote an article about Peter and the Sporting KC culture back in 2018. Obviously, they were flying back then. Things are a lot different on the field for them now. But I talked to Peter about how he established that culture in the beginning. And he told me, and he said, when you have something bad, you've got to cut. It's like a snake. You have to cut the head off the snake. And he traded players and got players out of there that were the snake and the problem with the culture in the locker room.
And got money for him.
Oh, boy. One of those players is now in trial on a trial back within the team again. I think it's really interesting in talking about that, because I understand from like a perspective that is necessary. But my question is what did this mean? Did this really mean a cult? Like, if from everything that we said, because of the vagueness of this, nothing feels like there was an immediacy, like there was just a glaring or a singular issue that they're not talking about, a singular moment that they're not talking about that was irreversible. That would have affected the culture, the players in some way, shape, or form. That was
right. That needed to be taken care of.
And the player culture is the player culture. I mean, they're fighting and grinding through it. I think they talked about, we don't really look like ourselves. Sometimes players go through like lulls. Like, it's not always on the coach. And yeah, for 3 games for that to be the concern, just a little interesting. And I think there was a good question that was asked before all that we didn't play. But I want to say it may have been a question from one of the TV stations. And the question was, did he change from last year to this year? Was there a change in him? And the answer, kind of dodged that. So if there was a change, was this short? Was this worth doing that? And if this was a long-term problem, if it was a problem last year and persisted and you got the results on the field, like, did it really become that untenable in that moment? I don't know about that, because we had conversations with them back in December before they signed Gautreau and before they signed, or when they signed Gautreau and DiBernardo, and I think both of them were very much on the same page about the additions that needed to be made to the roster and the things that they worked with, and I think that's,
and the impacts they would make, and
yeah.
They were working very well together to not talk to us about various things too.
That too.
It just doesn't. Again, I just keep going back to it. Doesn't make sense to do it at that moment unless there was some form of safety issue. Even if it was something you really needed to take care of, that you felt you needed to take care of, the next morning would have been fine.
Yeah.
Because instead you put players through a roller coaster of a shock, and an assistant coach being the interim coach, and all of that in just a few hour span before a game that's important, because the Challenge Cup, it's a
World Cup style, like Champions League, World Cup style knockout stage. You got to get those points.
Right. And overall the Challenge Cup doesn't mean much, except now it has $1 million worth of money attached to it. And it's it's just incredible that you would make that decision at that moment. And no matter how many times we asked that, there was different ways that question was asked, was why the immediacy? And it just kept coming back to, we felt the need to do it now. We had, we have to act. Why couldn't it have been just a few hours later?
Yeah, and then I wonder if that team had won, then it doesn't look as good. You're doing it off the back of a 4-2 loss instead of a 2-0 victory against Houston on the road.
But it wasn't off the back of the 4-2 loss. The back of the 4-2 loss would have been 2 days earlier.
Correct. And this
would have been before they flew down there.
Matt ran training on Tuesday. He talked to both of us as of like noon, maybe even later on Tuesday. We can pretty much confirm that man was still the head coach of the team.
Yeah. Actually, I'll say 11. About 11, I think, because that was about when you finished talking to him.
Yeah, sounds about right.
But anyway, middle of the day, he was still the head coach.
Yeah. That, and if it's off the back of the 4-2 loss, you don't even make that decision. You don't even let him coach the training session.
Right. You make that move before then. Yeah. And if you don't make it before then that's on you for not having made it in time, and you then live with the results. Because honestly, it's still none of this answered questions, other than, and hopefully accurately, that there was no player safety, no players abused, nothing like that. Mm-hmm. So it just leaves speculation of everything else it could be. And again, I understand the HR aspects of that. You can't give exact details on why people were fired. But at the same time, they could have gave a little more detail.
I agree. And I think that's the problem in this one, too, is that they came in and said they wanted to bring transparency. There wasn't a ton of it. They talk about being player first and being focused on the players and making decisions for the players, but nothing about Wednesday screams player first. No. And the way it was handled, the way, and I come away from this saying none of this couldn't have been said on Wednesday.
Right.
And if you're going to go through this decision, even if it's abrupt, even if it's unexpected, you have a game that's going off at 6:30. You could have at least waited and prepared yourself to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go on and take questions before the players.
Yeah.
And there's so many opportunities there to have gotten in front of it before the players had to ask it. And I've heard, thank you for handling it the way that you have. And because, especially on that day, the players didn't deserve to be thrown out there, and nothing about that. And like I said, nothing about the way things went down on Wednesday really screams player first. And for an organization that continues to talk about those actions being player first and screaming player first, remember the players hired this man. Yes. Essentially. That was one of the biggest things that we learned when you and I went to the press conference together. It was my first press conference, but the team with the star, and talking to Potter and Cammy. The players played a significant role in their input. They were in the interviews, and the players talked to these people.
And he was the one
And he was the one that the players selected. And a majority of those players that were part of that conversation are still on the team. And so you're taking, again, that's my question. Player first? Because of, or if there's truly no issues between players and coach, then firing a coach for a successful one, a one that players repeatedly to us have talked glowingly about, firing the coach that they like because of management disputes just doesn't scream player first in that moment.
No. And then just piling on, if you felt the need to, feeling the need to do it on that day, still don't understand. But if you're going to do it, you should have had a Zoom at 6 o'clock before that game started for media to talk to you and find out why. The first question to anybody should not have been to the assistant coach, Caroline, the interim head coach now, and then the next questions to Porlo and CC. The first question should have been to Camille Ashton that day. And then you compound that problem by not having the next opportunity being the next morning.
Mm-hmm. And so another whole day goes by. And I think that...
And I understand they were flying back.
Mm-hmm.
I get that. But it could have been done by Zoom. It could have been done when they got back. There's a lot of things that could have been done. And the first opportunity to talk to Camille is Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock, when you do normal news dumps for bad news.
Yep.
All right.
You're right. No, I got it. Surprisingly, I have nothing to add.
That is surprising. All right.
It's just, ultimately, I think for a club that has championship aspirations and championship expectations, I understand a slow start maybe puts that on there. But I think context in a lot of the things that they say and do needs to be understood across the board.
If you're saying you have championship expectations and you look at the first 3 games and say, oh, we need to fire a coach over that, then quite honestly, you're deluded because you have to look at the players that are available. Oh, yeah, it's a standard BS line that every coach is going to say and every GM is going to say, well, we trust in the players that we have available. Yeah, we all know who the best players are. We know that they are not the ones. Many of the best players for the Current have been unavailable for the majority of the time so far this season.
And 60 minutes in person. I've watched now at least 180 minutes of soccer in person for the Kansas City Current this year. The second half, they reverted back to the 3 at the back situation. And the entirety of the match against Chicago, they played 3 at the back situation. The best soccer they have played this season was when they did that.
Right.
And when they had Debinha and DiBernardo in the midfield. And you were talking about the stringent bottom, end of the depth that was getting a lot of minutes there in those first couple of games. And there's a reason why they bring those players in via free agency, because they are absolute game changers. Debinha, we'll talk a tiny soccer here. The second goal for the Current against Houston is entirely because in a transitional game, kind of like the NBA at times, in a transitional game, players that have gravity and suck players out of position because you have to try and get in front of them to try and stop them are great because they manipulate those moments, they create those moments, and they play Kate Del Fava with a ridiculous ball down the wing that just comes out. You're surprised how she even gets the pass off to Del Fava. She drew 3 defenders to her in that moment. To not have that, and to not have that in a healthy, consistent manner for the first 90 plus, so 60, first 150 minutes of the season.
I would argue that she's still not Debinha yet.
Still not there. She's getting there. Just starting to get there.
Yeah.
But that's a significant reason why you have her on your team, and the team continued to look better when they had her on the field.
Yeah.
And especially DiBernardo and helping control and pass and move and keep tempo going. It's good.
Yeah. And getting DiBernardo out there, she showed why they wanted her. We still haven't seen Gautreau. Well, we haven't even seen her in practice. We haven't seen Hannah Glass, Desi Scott, Alex Loera is out now. So there's all these players who should be starting, should be heavy contributors. Elizabeth Ball, she went out the first game. They've been hamstrung by all these injuries, and no, it's not the trainers, it's not the physios, it's not the training they did. It's
every team is dealing with injuries. Every team. I get the league NWSL injury report that just shows every team all in one place, every 24 hours before a match day, and you're just like, good Lord, everyone's going through it.
Yeah,
and MLS too.
Not all of them have as many.
Nope. Or as many key players.
Right. All right. Is there anything else we need to rail on at this point? I mean, we've talked about it. We're going to probably completely complain about it again the next time we get together. But we just wanted to at least get something out the same evening as we had this press conference.
Have a lot of thoughts on it. Already written nearly 1,000 words on it. And at least on my aspect I have. Yeah, so and we're doing, if you haven't heard the background music, we're doing this in a Starbucks off Berry Road near the training center. But yeah, I think this is an important moment in the club's history, short history for the current aspect of it. But I think this is something that is still confusing, and for a team with championship aspirations and all of that kind of stuff, this is going to be a very significant factor in how the rest of the season goes. And who knows, maybe Caroline comes in, and I mean, the players clearly trust her from what we've heard. They like her a lot. Sounds like management trusts her to be the interim to the point where they're not ready to commit to a timeline for a head coach search. So, she's been a head coach before in Sweden. She's pretty smart. She seems like she can motivate players based on everyone talking about her pregame speech.
Yep.
I think anything in that moment is probably motivational too, considering the emotions that they're all going through. But the long haul will eventually tell the story of whether or not this was the right move. They could still win a championship this year, and I still might question whether or not this was the right move. But I ultimately, I think we're going to learn a lot about the team, organization, staff through the rest of the season.
We will. And I do think that it will do overall harm to the club because of how this was handled, because of how some other things have been handled. If you were a coach looking to get an NWSL job, would you look at this like, why did they fire him? What happened? If they were really doing this based upon performance expectations, then nobody has a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody can go through these problems, and so it's. I think it does harm to the club to have been handled this way.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Any last words, Daniel?
No last words. I've mostly talked out. But yeah.
All right. Appreciate everybody listening, and check in with Daniel's articles at the Kansas City Star. With I know Cindy has already got an article up on Kansas City Soccer Journal. I'm probably going to try to have another one up in addition to this pod. And I appreciate everybody listening, and we are out.